Elon Musk is about to fund a new political party for the United States. He's going to call it the American Party, and we'll deal with that in a shorter video. I think you might have heard video, so you can digest that directly. But for this long slog of video, if you will, this is a rabbit hole that I've been going through since my very first election, which was the election that elected the then governor of Arkansas, Bill Clinton, where I gave him a chance to beat out the former or the incumbent president, who was George Herbert Walker Bush, because of third-party guy Ross Perot. It made me wonder about third parties. They've always existed. In fact, back in the original days of the Constitution and the beginning of the founding of the nation, there were a bunch of different parties because they didn't really know how it worked out. But the party system as we know it now, the two-party system, which is basically the Democrats and Republicans, donkeys and elephants, is what works and what's going to work until they figure something else out, or until they figure out something else will work and they'll try to destroy that in the process. Now, with that in mind, third parties are not something unheard of. In fact, you can be elected without being a part of the Democrats or Republicans. Many people do get elected in local elections, middle elections, and on a national level. Angus King and, of course, Bernie Sanders, very famous for being senators with independents behind their names. They caucus with the major forms. And, of course, Bernie Sanders ran as a Democratic candidate for president because there's no independent candidate. There'd be no money beside that. But being a candidate on the national stage and not being a D and an R is not unheard of. In fact, it's pretty much common. There are many other parties, third parties you've heard about, that make that cut all the time. I have this chart right here that has 7 of them, plus a larger smattering of smaller groups that don't quite make the list because they didn't quite make as big a splash as the other ones. But as far as getting on the ballot, it's not unheard of. Green Party, Jill Stein's there all the time. All nationwide, all states, that chance to get basically more than enough electoral college votes to win. Same with Libertarian Party. They had Chase Oliver running last time. The Socialism and Libertarian Party, ran by Claudia de la Cruz. Going below that, the Justice for All Party, Cornel West, of course, you heard he was running. He was on a party list and didn't quite make it. American Solidarity Party with Pete Solosky, 7 states got him in there, plus write-ins got as well. The Constitution Party was ran by Randall Terry on several states. Of course, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., after losing the shot at being a Democrat, went third party, went with the natural law, We the People Party, and he had partial ballot access, which is part of the reason why he fought he could. And then various states had other parties such as the Socialist Workers, Prohibition, Unity Party, etc. on their ballots. These are ballots you could cast for actual electoral college votes to win the election. They weren't going to win, but they were there. So it's not a fact that they're never there. It's a fact that they don't win. And we're going to go deep into that right now as we talk about what is the really big rabbit hole that I went down, which is in thinking about what exactly will the new American Party do for America and the party system that is the United States electoral system. And we're calling this Fun Time Had by All, Ross Perot, the Bull Moose Party, and the real influence of third parties in American politics, brought to you by the Conversation Project. Now, as I already said moments ago, and will continue to say throughout this piece, third parties don't win. They cannot win presidential elections. Well, they can, and they matter, but they just aren't going to win the way they work in our modern system of two parties. Back in the day when the Whigs ran around, there was a way where other parties could make a mention and make ways into the actual power to politics. But now, when it's only D's and R's, a third party cannot win because of the reasons we'll go into. Talking about Teddy Roosevelt and Ross Perot, the top folks who did their best, and the Ford Party to, of course, the new speculative America Party. We're not sure exactly what it is, but he says he's throwing money at it. Outsiders keep crashing the gates of American politics and trying to shake things up, stir up frustration, and maybe shift the national agenda. Maybe their point is just to make some noise. So we'll talk about those disruptions in this, and we'll tell you why the systems that we live under will not allow it to happen. They just won't let it happen. And what they actually say about the future we're heading towards with the past that we're kind of stuck in. Section 1, the Bull Moose Charge. Let's go back in a political time machine, going back to 1912. A great year to be had by all, except for Teddy Roosevelt, who was a former president at the time, but still a Republican icon who wanted to play the game, but did not get a line for the Republican nomination again. So he broke ranks from his party and made what was called the Progressive Party. The problem was the press called it the Bull Moose Party because the press. So that's how you know it in history. President Teddy Roosevelt came out of his presidency from the former, much like the former one did now, but came up with a new party to call it Bull Moose because that's who he is. It was fueled by the frustration over President Taft's betrayal of progressive reforms, and Roosevelt had a very bold platform to run on. Good things: worker protections, campaign finance transparency, and direct democracy. Sounds great, doesn't it? Well, the actual outcome came to a split in the Republican vote that allowed the Democrat Woodrow Wilson to win the presidency that year. Now, put a pin in that because we'll get back to that exact same process in just a moment. Roosevelt did something no third party ever did at that point in time, though, or hadn't quite done since. He actually finished second, not the Republican, the Bull Moose guy. 88 electoral votes, 27% of the popular vote, and a real shot across the bow at what politics could have been. But there was a problem. The party, the Progressive Party, the Bull Moose Party, whatever you want to call it, might as well be called the Roosevelt Party, because as Roosevelt faded away from the process, that party, that line just died. There was no actual machinery behind the actual Progress Party, the movement. There was no succession plan on who would be the next guy up to run for something big, and it was all about running for the big thing, not the smaller issues. There was no infrastructure in the bottom to bring up people in the lower courts, lower houses, lower terms for both House, Senate, or a local state type of election. It was just Roosevelt wanted to run for president again. He almost got it, but not quite enough. Powerful punch to the system, but extremely brief when it's all said and done in our history. Section 2. Ross Perot's populist movement. Jump back in that time machine. We're going forward a bit to 1992. This was my very first election as being old enough to participate in the vote. And so this one is extremely top of mind for me, and where the rabbit hole actually begins, not so much with the America Party, but this one right here and what it meant to politics and what I thought was going to be a change. And much like Bull Moose, stayed the same. Ross Perot was a self-made Texas billionaire. He had a flat top haircut, a sharp tongue, and armed with pie charts and outsider's bravado. He was a guy that was on TV saying, you know what? This is what we're going to do here. This is what we're going to do here. We're going to do this. He had an old guy who might have been a little bit lost in it as his vice presidential candidate, and he was everywhere every time. He made his way to the debates with both Herbert Walker Bush and Clinton and made a dent because he wasn't a Republican. He wasn't a Democrat. Those guys were on stage with him. He was something different. He was a plain-spoken technocrat who was screaming about the national debt, trade deficits, and political corruption. He basically was running off of NAFTA never coming to fruition. That was kind of his thing, and a couple things smaller as well. People were really into him. People wanted to hear his message. People came to vote for him. 19% of the vote. Almost 20 million Americans actually voted for Ross Perot. He didn't spend any taxpayer money. He didn't have a party. He was just Ross Perot showing up. And he was a billionaire and put his money on the line when elections were a little bit cheaper back then. The problem was he didn't win a single electoral vote, which meant he didn't really have anything to say. But his campaign mattered enough that it forced Clinton and Bush to answer real economic questions about what was going on. It injected an urgency into the conversation about NAFTA and the deficit and outsourcing. And his Reform Party didn't last, because what he did was pull votes away from the other Republican, the incumbent, H.W. Bush. So he didn't get a second term. Clinton starts his term and his reign of terror, if you want to call it. And yes, I voted for Clinton. And all was said and done, because it became a punchline at some point in time that Ross Perot even existed, and that his party, while trying to stay afloat after Ross Perot lost that first election, didn't. Section 3. Why third parties struggle. There's an uncomfortable truth in politics. In a system for Americans built to make third parties lose, we still put up the idea that anyone has a shot. If you try hard enough and the right winds are behind your sails, you can make things happen. Except in politics, especially in national politics. The winner-take-all electoral college is the problem. Ballot access rules are written by the two parties in charge, so they can make it so that the third parties have a hard time getting onto it. That's why the parties that make it onto the ballot make it there, because those parties have little chance of actually making any waves of disrupting the big parts. They do get votes. Jill Stein gets lots of votes lots of times. But people like to think Jill Stein's the reason why someone like Hillary Clinton did not win the election, or someone like Kamala Harris didn't win the election. There weren't that many third-party votes that were going to save those candidates. The media treats third-party candidates like novelties, not like the actual contenders. Yes, they talked about Robert Kennedy III, or Jr., I should say, when he was going to that route when he got Trump from the Democrats. Yes, Ross Perot was a big story because he had lots of money and made things happen. People picked up on him. But no one else was making waves. In fact, when we get to the Forward Party, we'll discuss sort of why that happened, where they got some coverage, but in the end, they could not actually pull off a candidate, which is the real problem. It's practically difficult to get on the ballots and make something that actually works because the whole system is designed for a third party, someone who's not backed by the Republicans or Democrat, to fail. It's not just hard, it's essentially an impossibility. Third parties do gain traction in some cases, and then they're accused of being spoilers, much like Ross Perot, much like Teddy Kennedy, and just like Ralph Nader in 2000. Remember that guy? Well, you remember him because he's run for a lot of things and he's never won anything, but he doesn't have enough people who think enough about him so that they make someone else seem to lose. People hesitate to vote for third parties. They settle for what they have, the red or the blue. They pick the lesser of the two evils, or in some cases, the evil that they think they can get away with, as opposed to the other evil that's just as evil. Because in many ways, they're just the same people, just wearing different badges, different uniforms. They choose who they choose, not because they want to. They really want more choices. But more choices throws chaos into the whole system and the party going back and forth. When you don't know what happens and you have no idea that the third person can actually win a race, in most cases they can't, you're afraid of what's going to happen. And you're afraid that your vote will be thrown away, and you're afraid that you're going to vote for the loser and help the one you don't want to win be the winner. You could vote for the loser regardless and one that you want to win regardless, but you don't want to say you're the vote that threw away and let it go. Push it towards the guy you want to. That is what people say. That's what people think. But in actuality, it's the parties, the Republicans and Democrats, that make this so hard for the other parties. Section 4, the Forward Party's middle ground. We're going to talk about Andrew Yang in this section, and this is an interesting case because he ran for president in 2020. He sort of made some noise and people sort of got the attention of folks, but he was kind of the Trader Bros sort of candidate, oddly enough, as a middle-aged Asian man. So he was the one that the younger folks who were kind of bro-ish wanted to win, and he didn't win because he didn't have the gravitas, he didn't have the pieces, he didn't have the background, and of course, Clyburn didn't tell us to vote for him. There's that. But Yang actually broke away from the Democrats with the money he had backing him and other folks who want something different and launched an actual party called the Forward Party. And he had a good message. He was going to end polarization, fix the system, and add in more places, ranked choice voting, something that actually made sense in the way the economies work these days. Have open primaries where you can vote for whoever you want to get into the system and just make it work. And use the data, what people are actually saying with the polls, saying with the actual numbers, how things are moving, over the political dogma that has existed for, at this point, 249 years. And it sounds really good. But the problem with the sounding is, it sounds really good. But what exactly do they believe in? Are they actual liberals? Are they actually conservatives? Are they tech-savvy centralists? What are they doing? The biggest issue was they were looking for people who were willing to compromise. There's so a middle ground, if you will. And middle grounds never works. It's always extremes. So if you've got one guy who's conservative and one guy who's liberal, it mixes the message. May sound great on paper, may sound good in some sort of Hollywood or TV drama because it happens in cases there to make things work out. It just doesn't actually work out so well when the party lacks an actual, thought process. Saying we want to come to the middle ground and then saying whose ground is in the middle is the issue. It's vague. It's really polite and process focused. We want to get somebody in charge so they can just run stuff. Not that they're based on any real sort of philosophy, because people want to be falling in love with the candidates, not finding somebody who's just going to get stuff done. Reality. So there's no firebrand leader, no clear ideological cause. They talked to a bunch of different people who want to be president. I think Joe Manchin was in that part for a while. Many folks were kind of thought in the process to get there, but they never actually launched a candidacy. They couldn't get on the ballot. So they really didn't push very hard. Now, they've not gone away, and Andrew Yang still pops up here or there to talk about what the Forward Party is and what party politics does in the world. But the Forward Party as an actual new hammer to go against the system, not exactly there. It's more or less the TED Talk of political debate. At some point in time, it really, really was nice and cool. But now there's so many iterations and so many imitations, it doesn't really make a difference. So if you want to choose a solution to dysfunction, you have to choose an actual solution to dysfunction. Not just bring smart ideas and smart people around to say, oh, we'll fix it when we get there. You got to tell us I can fix it beforehand and see if people want to go for that. Section 5, Elon Musk and the American Party chaos. I told you we get to Elon Musk and this American Party. I told you we get there. Now, there will be other videos back and forth in the shorter versions, the things you might have heard that will be more dealing with the story itself. But this is the larger narrative of third parties, so bear with us here. At various points in his life, he has actually floated the idea of launching a third party. This is not a new idea, and he wants to name it the American Party now because America, I guess. But Elon Musk, who was born in South Africa and is a naturalized citizen of the United States, which now Donald Trump wants to throw back at him and maybe send him back to South Africa, doesn't have the chance to actually run for president. His time with Doge and being the first buddy is as close as he's going to get, and it was pretty darn close to having the power of the presidency with Donald Trump just sort of letting him do what he wanted to do on the side. Then the breakup, which is why we have this issue, if you will. Musk has enormous influence with social capital, owning X, financial capital, he is a billionaire, and cultural. People follow him for whatever reason because they love him or they really don't like him, but they follow what he says. He commands headlines and attention and controversy. But would anybody actually follow him to be in charge of the government? After his first shot with Doge, probably not. Because number one, they've seen what he's done. And people who are on the outside looking in, we're not happy with Elon Musk, and we're one of the first people to say he was not elected to this case. In fact, many folks on the Republican side who elected Donald Trump and Elon Musk came alongside said, we didn't actually elect Elon to do this stuff. He promised some things and people were kind of happy with the chainsaw bit, but in actuality, he's causing more strife than saviorlessness. He's doing a lot of things that have some intended consequences that are adding to the unintended consequences that people are actually feeling. He's extremely unpredictable. If you've seen him anywhere, you know that. Some days he actually leans more libertarian, which is more or less where he's from. He was a more or less Democrat until the Democrats decided they didn't like him very much. Other days he's a big nationalist and he tends to play those things. He also is really big on conspiracy theories, like playing them up like they are true. And he jokes about things like coups. And he's a troll, a really rich troll, really good troll, really expansive troll. A Musk-led party wouldn't be built on policy. It's built on personality, and it's not bull moose. He can't actually run for president. He can't run for, well, he can run for anything but president, essentially. But he can't actually be in charge. And so if whoever's in charge has to have a personality that hopefully won't burn out with Elon Musk, and understood that he is the puppet, he is a Pinocchio with the strings, and not Geppetto, or a Pinocchio without strings. There would be chaos. It would be real. The memes of the dog sitting in the fire drinking coffee saying, this is fine, may be what we actually get to see. We think we're there now. Oh, trust me, if Elon's running a party that wins something, we will be in chaos. Probably more noise than actual results if this thing happens, but we'll see. Elon Musk can fund some minor candidates in the House and Senate, and maybe they'll win as technical independents, and maybe they'll eventually caucus with the Democrats or Republicans based on what's going on. But the Elon Musk-led party is doomed to start. Section 6. The real influence of third parties. Hindsight tells me I should have talked about this slide here and the influence, because we're talking about the influence of third parties, all the ones that made it to the national ballot who ran for office last term but didn't make it. But I don't want to redo the script, and editing is terrible. So let's just go to the point that we're going to right here. And that point is that third parties almost never win anything, at least on the top level. They do win on local elections, state elections, things like that, but they hardly ever make their way into the national politics. And when they do, they are just called independents because there's no other people to caucus with, and they caucus with someone else. A third party candidate, wherever they are, can offer influence. Jimmy, the rent is too damn high, McMillan, although a joke candidate and essentially found to be someone who basically wasn't paying enough taxes or rent, which is why he faded in obscurity, is the precursor. It's the taste we get that leads us to someone who can seriously say things like that, like Zohran Mamdani. So Jimmy McMillan is not your mayor of New York City, but Mamdani has a good chance of making that way this upcoming election, because they can raise the issues and they can shift debates to things that really matter. They can force the Democrats and Republicans to adjust to their game and not have to just play the two-party game that is what it is. Teddy Roosevelt actually pushed Wilson to more progressivism because he got bounced out of the election, but proved that the people really wanted more progressive values. Taft didn't make it work, but Roosevelt was able to influence Wilson going forward. Perot put deficit spending and trade into the spotlight because it was his big deals, and people actually voted for him for that. Because that, people noticed there was an issue, and the actual person in charge, Bill Clinton, did something to do something about it. He tried to fix it in his own way. Republicans may not agree. And Jill Stein and Gary Johnson have been in the margins since 2016. They may not have actually won anything, but for 10 years of politics and for next upcoming elections, if they're still in those spots, they have been out there as a choice, whether it's a throwaway choice out of some sort of way to protest, or someone really believes that the Green Party or the Labor Party or Libertarian Party is going to make it happen. They're there to vote for. They don't have to win the race, but they change the landscape that's on track. They do take votes away from the general populace, which means better chance for one of the other sides to win, since they won't get enough to really make a difference. If you can't win, all you can do is be a spoiler. And sometimes being a spoiler is just enough. In conclusion, where do we go from here? An early part into the thank yous for sticking around for this video at this point, but you've stuck around this long and you're wondering why. What's the takeaway? What was the actual point of going through all these lines and all these people and how the elections are doomed? Because it must be a Republican and a Democrat, and they put up terrible candidates every time. Third parties actually teach us something about our potential and what we can have. Because the people want options. They're hungry for something else that's a bit more than what we're getting. They're frustrated by the stagnation that is the two parties, red and blue, and what they present and what they take away. And they want something new. The problem is, real change doesn't come from just disruption. Just showing up and making a bunch of noise doesn't make change. It annoys people. It comes from building onto something that's sustainable and patient to grow from a local level. Ross Perot showed us that one person can do a lot with money and momentum, and Teddy Roosevelt showed us that what a movement looks like can be real with conviction. Now it's up to folks like Andrew Yang, who's shown us that if you reform things and want to make it reality, you got to put work into it. It's a time effort. It's a show up effort. It's a talk effort, and it's not going to be an easy thing to do. And if you want to see chaos, Elon Musk, his party may bring it to us now, but sometimes chaos is from where we get the actual new thing from it, when we can sort of quell that craziness from all of the chaos. Maybe a third party is not about winning, because they aren't winning, but they're about getting ideas out, making things known, and making sure that you keep things going forward. The same way we do protests, the same way you show up for meetings where you know you're not going to win, the same way you speak up in a forum that you know your idea is not popular with. You just want to make sure that idea gets out there, and then more people can hear it. If they garner onto it, more power to you. If they don't, go back to the drawing board, find another way to speak out of it. Because if you believe it long enough or hard enough and push for it enough times, someone will hear you. Will they do something about it? Hopefully. Eventually, those ideas trickle up to the folks who are in actual power, the red or the blue, Democrat, Republican. donkey or an elephant, and they will take it for themselves and run with it as best as popular. Donald Trump running on a lot of very populist ideas because it works. He also does it because he literally, at this point in time, there's nothing holding him back. He can do anything he wants to. He probably could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and no one would try to stop him. He's an actual convicted felon and a person convicted of sexual inappropriateness, but he's our president and he's getting things done. But those third parties or those independents, people who aren't exactly in the power base, still need to keep talking, because the giants may be giants, and we're not expecting David to take a giant down. We're expecting one of them to at least get their ear, because the people are really ready for something more, something bigger. In American politics, the real power of a third party isn't the office they win. It's the future they help shape by speaking out and just being there to keep the message going and remind the other folks that there are other people with other messages going out there, even if they get muted by the main stage. Thank you everybody for being here with us for this video. This was a rabbit hole that only a nerd like me could really follow. I appreciate anyone who followed along with me on this one, because we are going to deal with this. We will deal with the third party that is the American party with Elon Musk as we can in smaller doses. But this was an idea that once that idea got out there, it really brought to mind, why don't these things work more often? Why does Jill Stein come up on the ballot every so often? And people say she's a spoiler, yet she never wins any votes. Why is she that important or that much of a menace to the Democratic Party? Why does Hillary hate her so much? Well, there's the big issue on how the influence of third parties actually work, and they do have an influence. As I said, they just can't win. And since they can't win, their main purpose is to be a spoiler and make sure that some ideas that aren't quite being mainstreamed gets out there in the public, so hopefully someone picks up on them. What do we do with this one? We see if Andrew Yang can find a group of people who can come up with an actual coherent and cohesive idea, even if they're technically on both sides of the aisles. They were going to run someone who was a Democrat in the vice president and a Republican in the president, or vice versa, based on which guy decided they actually want to be the top person. My guess, if they could have pulled a Nikki Haley, they might have actually got something to work until Nikki Haley fell in line with Donald Trump anyway. That's my opinion. You want to give your opinion on this video, any video we have for the Conversation Project. Conversation Project is really about conversations, about us talking about ideas, going deeper. And I appreciate you guys giving me the idea to do these longer video essay, deeper things as well. I'll get better at the process. Trust me, we'll get better at the process. You keep doing what you're doing. Be as good as you are with the comments. So trash me, love me. You're probably going to trash me. Let me know what you think about this big thing here and this big thing here in a long video. Of course, all the things like subscribe, share with friends. You watch this on YouTube, so consider giving me a super chat, a sticker, or joining in as a member here so that you can help us fund things going forward. Remember, we have our Buy Me a Coffee thing. Go to thisisconversationproject.com/partnerships, and you'll see the link to join up on Buy Me a Coffee, or I'm Jay Cleveland Payne at Buy Me a Coffee. Sign up for one of the coffee memberships there because they're still going on. My hiatus is turning into a bigger deal, although we're changing the way things look and changing things going on. We're going to do more greater things, bigger things, larger things, more conversational things as we can. And so appreciate the love, appreciate the folks who actually recognize me out in public. They're mostly friends of friends who say, hey, I'm watching your thing. I appreciate that. Check in on a brother every so often, because I check on the folks every so well, because you never know where we're going. Life is what it is. The background is very rocky, very scary, but in the front, we're trying to do our best to help everybody out going forward. If you need something, call on me. I'll do what I can. We're out of here for this video. Don't know what the next long form will be, because whatever rabbit hole that jumps in my head yet tomorrow. More hot takes, more things you might have heard, short videos, and more things you might have heard coming in the long videos. We're going to go back to those, hopefully, in some way. Longer videos, more or less like what we did for the TikTok stuff, the quick reads or something like that. I'm rambling because I don't know how to end these things. I love you guys. Thank you so much for being with us. Pushing for some Ross Perot, pushing for some Teddy Roosevelt. You know how many people really are into this Bull Moose Party thing? It's a pretty big deal in history, much bigger than you may think. History doesn't repeat itself, but often rhymes. So you might want to catch that tune before it catches you on the downbeat. We'll talk to you guys later. Comments are welcome.